Now let's learn in detail about the malignant tumors of connective tissue origin. So in this particular portion we won't be learning all the malignant tumors, only that is which is important MCQ viewpoint, and those which are important points regarding MCQ viewpoint which are important for NEET exam, those we'll be dealing about. Okay. So coming on to the basic difference between a carcinoma and a sarcoma. As I told you earlier, what is a carcinoma? Carcinoma is the one which is originating from the epithelium, whereas that which originates from the connective tissue is known as sarcoma. So connective tissue origin is sarcoma, and carcinoma is mostly what? Lymphatic spread, whereas sarcoma, connective tissue lesions, are mostly blood spread. Okay, and mainly they are mandibular sarcoma spreads to lung region firstly, and carcinoma among carcinoma, but there is one exception, that is renal cell carcinoma. So most of the carcinomas are showing lymphatic spread. Among that one, that is renal cell carcinoma, shows the blood spread. Whereas coming on to sarcoma, there is one exception, that is rhabdomyosarcoma is the only sarcomatic lesion which spreads through lymphatic spread, okay, not blood spread. So that is a basic difference between a carcinoma and a sarcoma. Coming on to various malignant connective tissue tumors, which are they? These are fibrosarcoma, malignant fibrous histiocytoma, liposarcoma, hemangioendothelioma, hemangiopericytoma, Kaposi sarcoma, Evic sarcoma, chondrosarcoma, osteosarcoma, and synovial sarcoma. So among these we will be learning about the important ones. Coming on to first one, that is fibrosarcoma. So fibrosarcoma is what? It is a tumor of mesenchymal cell origin that is composed of malignant fibroblast in a collagenous background. So as I told you, just remember what I had shown you, epithelium and connective tissue. So that is a normal epithelium and connective tissue. In the connective tissue you have the fibroblast cells. So when there is malignancy for these fibroblast cells which are producing the collagen fibers, it results in fibrosarcoma. Okay. So fibrosarcoma is a tumor of mesenchymal cell origin, that is connective tissue cell origin, that is composed of what? Malignant fibroblast cells. Okay, so these fibroblast cells are the ones which produce the collagen, so there is a collagenous background. Okay, so this fibrosarcoma of the bone is of two types, primary and secondary. So primary is the one which origin within the bone itself, whereas secondary is arising from a pre-existing lesion. So which means there was a pre-existing lesion in that particular bone. From that particular lesion you have the development of the fibrosarcoma. Okay, so that is secondary type of fibrosarcoma. So MCQ viewpoint, you have to remember the histology pattern of fibrosarcoma. It's very, very important. So look into the picture now. You can see herringbone pattern. Okay, so fibrosarcoma, there is herringbone pattern. So just below that I have given one herring fish. Okay, herring fish, that is an image of the herring fish. So this herring fish, the bone is similar to that of the pattern is similar to that of the bony arrangement of that herring fish. Okay, that is why the term is given as fibrosarcoma. So see clearly that same bony arrangement, that herring type of bony arrangement is shown in that of the connective tissue. Okay, so that is why this pattern of arrangement is known as fibrosarcoma. So what happens here? The spindle shaped cells, that is the fibroblast cells, are arranged in a herringbone pattern in a background of collagen fibers. So this pattern is very, very important. MCQ viewpoint, image based questions can come. So herringbone pattern can be shown as a histology picture and you will be asked to identify the particular lesion. So this type of arrangement is seen in fibrosarcoma, herringbone pattern. Okay, remember. Next important lesion is malignant fibrous histiocytoma. So in this lesion, this is the most common soft tissue sarcoma occurring in adults. If you see among the adults, the most common soft tissue sarcoma is malignant fibrous histiocytoma, and mostly males are having this particular lesion. And in this particular lesion also you have to remember the histology pattern. The histology pattern is storiform pattern or a cartwheel like pattern. So can you see in that image I have shown one circle, a blue color circle. So the arrangement of the cells are around that circle. Okay, in a cartwheel form. Okay, so that Burlow cartwheel arrangement. So in the same pattern arrangement is shown everywhere in that particular image. So this is the classical histology picture, storiform pattern seen in malignant fibrous histiocytoma. So I have given that cartwheel or small blue color circle I have given in the center for you people to understand, okay, clearly. So if that is the center of that circle, the cells are arranged around that circle. The cells are arranged around that circle. Okay, so that is storiform pattern or cartwheel-like pattern seen in malignant fibrous histiocytoma. Now next lesion is hemangiopericytoma. Here also histology is very important, but just remember what is hemangiopericytoma. It is actually known as solitary fibrous tumor nowadays. It's a rapidly enlarging red or bluish mass, soft or rubbery in consistency, and the origin of this hemangiopericytoma is from that of cells called pericytes. Okay, so the origin is from pericytes. Okay, remember that point. Now, in case of hemangiopericytoma, what is the pattern? Staghorn pattern. Staghorn pattern. Remember. So, that is the arrangement of leaves of the staghorn fern. Okay. So, staghorn is actually a type of fern. Okay. The first picture is that arrangement of that particular fern. The leaves are arranged in that particular order. Same pattern, the cells are arranged in case of hemangiopericytoma histologically. Okay. So, that is why there is a staghorn pattern appearance. So, this is why staghorn pattern is seen in that of hemangiopericytoma. Remember that very, very clearly. So, here it is originating from that of pericytes. So, what you can see in histologically, numerous vascular blood vessels, okay, with plump endothelial cells you can see and nuclei surrounding tightly packed proliferation of oval and spindle cells can be seen with hyperchromatic nuclei and moderate amount of cytoplasm. So, this is the classical picture, staghorn pattern. Now, the main differential diagnosis is glomus tumor. Okay, glomus tumor or glomangioma. So, in case of hemangiopericytoma. So, the main difference is that in case of hemangiopericytoma, they don't have a perivascular glomus cells, cell accumulations are not seen. Okay, whereas in case of glomus tumor, you can see mainly they are arising from cutaneous glomus. So, what is a glomus? Actually, it's a communication between the venule and that of nerves. Okay, venules and the arteries. Okay, so and it will be surrounded by nerves. It will be mostly seen in the nail beds. Okay, so this glomus tumor mainly occurs in childhood and adolescence. So that is a main differential diagnosis with hemangiopericytoma. Histologically, this is the main differential diagnosis. Just remember that particular point. Hemangiopericytoma histologically similar to glomus tumor. Next important lesion malignant connective tissue tumor is actually Kaposi sarcoma. Kaposi sarcoma in most of the times MCQs it is related to HIV. Okay, so HIV, so human immunovirus infection, HIV infection, the neoplasm seen in HIV affected individuals, HIV positive individuals is mainly Kaposi sarcoma. That is a routinely asked question. So just remember this point. What is Kaposi sarcoma? Is a multiple idiopathic hemorrhagic sarcoma of Kaposi. It's a tumor of blood vessels. Actually, it's a tumor of blood vessels, Kaposi sarcoma. And what is happening in Kaposi sarcoma? There is n number of proliferation of endothelial cell origin. Okay, blood vessels, there is a rapid proliferation, and the main factors can be a HHV8 virus also or a HIV virus also. Okay, and there can be environmental influences, geographic patterns, and also reduced immunosurveillance for the individual. Okay, so HIV is the individuals. Most of the times the HIV positive individuals will be affected with Kaposi sarcoma. Now, what is the classification? Classification wise, Kaposi sarcoma can be means classified into classical type, secondly endemic type, the one which occurs only in the African region, thirdly immunosuppression type, that which is associated with transplantation. If you have a kidney transplantation or a liver transplantation, your immunity becomes very weak. So thus for such individuals, if there is occurrence of Kaposi sarcoma, it is classified into the third category. Last one, AIDS related. As I told you, AIDS can be, HIV can be a causative factor for Kaposi sarcoma. So it can be seen as a primary infection or as a secondary infection also. Okay, so this is the basic classification: classic version, endemic version, immunosuppression type associated with transplantations, and lastly AIDS related Kaposi sarcoma. Now let's learn a small note regarding this classification. So classical type, as I told you, it is mainly seen in the Mediterranean region. Okay, endemic one is seen in the African population, whereas classical one is mostly seen in the Mediterranean region. And how do they appear? They appear as multinodular exophytic reddish lesions. Okay, and mostly they are seen on the skin of lower extremities, legs. Okay, mostly seen on the legs, and they increase slowly in size and number, and they spread and coalesce into different plaques. So initially they are shown as individual small nodules, and then they spread and they combine, they coalesce. Okay, And the second type is endemic variety seen among the children of African region, and this is also mainly seen in the extremities, legs and arms, and also in the skin areas of legs and arms. Okay. Third one is AIDS related. As I told you, most of the time MCQ viewpoint they ask that third type. Okay, AIDS related. How do they appear? Small flat pink patches. Okay, papules or plaques, or sometimes nodules also, and they appear on the trunk, arms, head and neck region. Oral cavity also they can appear. Okay, so mainly on the hard palate, gingiva and tongue. So see clearly the image. Okay, so how does it appear in the oral cavity? As I told you, they appear as small pinkish discolorations, and they appear as papules or nodules, and sometimes they coalesce later on, and they see mostly on the hard palate. Okay, so that is what is shown. Histologically, there are three different types of this Kaposi sarcoma. One is patch type, okay, one is plaque type, and last one is nodular type. So patch type means there is proliferation of blood capillaries around a pre-existing dilated blood vessel. Okay, plaque type means there is increased number of capillaries, okay, with development of spindle cell component also. Whereas last one, nodular type, means there is increased atypical spindle cells with increased capillaries and dilated blood vessels with areas of extravasate RBCs and hemocytin deposition. Okay, so these are the three different types. Okay, histology picture of Kaposi sarcoma. One is patch type, one is plaque type, and one is nodular variety. So patch means it will be small proliferations around the pre-existing blood vessel, whereas plaque type means there is increased number of capillary with development of spindle cell component, and lastly nodular type means there is increased atypical spindle cells, okay, with increased capillaries and dilated blood vessels with areas of some amount of extravasated RBCs also can be seen. So the picture is showing actually a nodular variety histologically. Okay, so MCQ viewpoint, it is not that important, so just note down which are the three different types. That's enough. Coming on to next important one, that is Ewig sarcoma. Ewig sarcoma is routinely asked MCQ. Ewig sarcoma radiological picture is very important. Okay, so Ewig sarcoma is otherwise known as endothelial myeloma or round cell sarcoma. It's a common and unique chromosomal translocation is the main causative factor. What is the gene which is translocated? 11 and 22. Okay, and mainly different types of the morphological variations can be seen. The mainly asked MCQ is Ewig sarcoma, what is the radiological appearance? Radiological appearance is onion skin appearance. Okay, radiology wise, Ewig sarcoma shows onion skin appearance. So just see in that image, relate and study, remember with the pic. Okay, so onion skin appearance, you can see clearly in that first picture, that arrow mark, you can see the arrangement of that bone is actually in the form of the onion skin. Okay, in the second image also it's very clear, and third image you can see how the arrangement of the leaves of an onion is placed. Okay, so of the skin. So onion skin appearance is mainly seen in Ewig's sarcoma radiology wise. Okay, clear. Now see the histology part of Ewig sarcoma, that is also very important MCQ. Filigree pattern. Okay, filigree pattern, histology wise filigree pattern arrangement is seen in Ewig sarcoma. So what is a filigree? That is what is I have shown in the first picture. Okay, that is a picture of a filigree leaf. That is the arrangement. Similar arrangement you can see histologically. Now look into that. Now compare it with that of the second image. Histologically the singing pattern with circle arrangement is shown in that of the second picture. Okay, so the same pattern, filigree pattern, is what is I have shown. Okay, so this is the filigree pattern is seen histology wise in Ewig sarcoma, onion skin appearance of Ewig sarcoma radiologically. Okay, so guys, we learned in benign neoplasms of connective tissue, we learned about chondroma, isn't it? Okay, so similar to that, when there is a malignant version of chondroma, it is chondrosarcoma. So just remember that point, chondroma, chondrosarcoma. The malignant version is chondrosarcoma. So they actually histologically you can see, radiographically both 18 radiolucencies you can see, and histologically different grading is there. Grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 based upon how much severity is present. Okay, in grade 1 you have in chondrosarcoma there is resembles the chondroma or chondrocytes, whereas grade 2 there is more cellularity and less amount of matrix formation, and lastly grade 3 is the one with highly cellular. Okay, so question can be asked, most highly cellular grade of chondrosarcoma is actually grade 1 or grade 2 or grade 3. It's actually grade 3, highly cellular with pleomorphism. Okay, Coming on to osteosarcoma. Osteosarcoma is actually a true malignant neoplasm of the bone. Okay, so in this particular lesion, what happens is that malignant osteoblast cells are differentiating. So we all know that what are osteoblasts? Osteoblasts are the cells which form the bone. Okay, so they are bone forming cells. So when there is a malignancy for these osteoblast cells, there is excess amount of bone formation. So that means it produces tumorous kind of osteoid or sometimes tumorous cartilage type of lesion. Okay, so osteosarcoma is the malignant neoplasm of bone. True malignant neoplasm of bone is osteosarcoma, and it is considered to be the most common primary malignant tumor of the bone. That is a very important MCQ. The most common primary malignant tumor of the bone. Okay, within the bone itself, as the lesion originates, it is called as primary. So if the question is being asked as primary malignant tumor of the bone, it is osteosarcoma. Okay, but if the question is asked like which is the most common malignant lesion of the bone, then it is the metastatic carcinoma. Metastatic carcinoma of the bone is actually the most common malignant lesion. Okay, putting all the primary and secondary lesions together, the most common malignant lesion of bone is metastatic carcinoma. But if you take primary lesion alone, then the most common primary malignant tumor of the bone is osteosarcoma. Okay, so try to differentiate between these two. Okay, it's very important. Now, which are the predisposing factors? So osteosarcoma can develop from other lesions also, like Page's disease, from fibrous dysplasia, from chondromatosis, or hereditary multiple exostosis, or it can be hereditary also. Hereditary in the sense it can be familial. Okay, it can be from one generation to next generation. It can be transmitted because of the deletion of chromosome 13q14, and there is inactivation of RB gene in this particular case. This results in development of retinoblastoma, and the retinoblastoma finally develops into osteosarcoma. Okay, and other syndromes which can develop into osteosarcoma is Li-Fraumeni syndrome and Rothman-Thompson syndrome. Okay, so remember all these points, very very important. Osteosarcoma is the true malignant neoplasm of the bone. So it's the most common primary malignant tumor of the bone. But if you are being asked which is the most common malignant lesion of the bone, then it is metastatic carcinoma. Okay, and then the predisposing factors are also important. Just remember the chromosome number 13q14 and inactivation of RB gene is involved here. Coming on to classification of osteosarcoma, they are classified into classical type, okay, telangiectatic type, small cell osteosarcomas, giant cell type of osteosarcoma, periosteal and parosteal type. So these are the different classifications. So within the classical variety, you should remember they can form the osteoid bone or they can form a cartilage also. So if it is in between, fibroblast cells are, means if it is more fibroblastic, then it is called as the third variety. If it is more bone, then it is osteoblastic variety. If it is cartilage more, then it is chondroblastic variety. Okay, so that is how it is being classified. Coming on to the clinical features and oral manifestation, these are not so important MCQ viewpoint, but just remember, most of the time the oral manifestations will be swelling or pain. Sometimes the involved bone will be having resulting in loose teeth, paresthesia, toothache, bleeding and nasal obstruction also. And the most commonly affected jaw is mandible compared to maxilla. Okay, so mandible is most involved. Primary malignant tumor of the bone, osteosarcoma, mostly involves the mandible compared to maxilla. Now, what are the radiological features? The radiological feature is very, very important. MCQ viewpoint, and the image radiograph is also very important. So note down the radiograph. What do we see? We see a sclerosing form or osteolytic form. That is, sclerosic means it will be showing excess amount of radio opacity. Okay, so there is excess amount of bone formation. So you can see radio opacity. So the appearance will be what? Sun ray or sunburst appearance. Okay, so it will be similar to that of a sun ray. Sun ray or a sunburst appearance. So that is why radiological feature of osteosarcoma is actually the sun ray or sunburst appearance. And remember that the radiograph also, it's very, very important. Then other than that, what you can see is, look into the next picture, second one. Okay, what you can see, Codman's triangle. What is Codman's triangle? It is actually when there is excess amount of bone formation, there is elevation of the periosteum. As you know, the bone will be having an endosteal region and there will be an outer region, that is periosteum. So when there is, because of the excess amount of bone formation, when there is elevation of periosteum, there will be over expanding tumor mass in a tent-like fashion. Okay, there will be a tent-like fashion deposition. So this is known as Codman's triangle. Okay, it is clearly depicted in the second picture. Okay, it is written 2. Okay, whereas first one you can see onion skin appearance. The same picture I had shown in some other lesion. Do you remember which lesion? Onion skin appearance radiologically seen in Ewig sarcoma, isn't it? So Ewig sarcoma, whereas Codman's triangle. So I just put that picture so that you will be able, whether you are able to recollect the picture or not, you just try out. Okay, so onion skin appearance is seen in Ewig sarcoma, whereas Codman's triangle is seen in osteosarcoma. Remember these 2 points, very, very important. Coming on to the staging. Okay, the staging is like stage 1, stage 2 and stage 3. The first stage is low grade lesions, stage 2 is high grade lesions, and last one a metastatic type of disease. Coming on to substages, the substages will be A and B. A will be intramedullary lesion and B will be local extramedullary spread. And site of primary lesion, based upon the site of primary lesion, it can be distal extremities. Okay, if the involvement of the bone is seen mainly in the distal part of the bone, then the chances of recovery is very high. So that means best prognosis. Okay, second one, distal femur. If the affected bone is distal part of the femur, then it is intermediate kind of prognosis. Where if the axial skeleton is involved, then the prognosis is very poor. Okay, it is the worst prognosis. So based upon the site of primary involvement, you can classify. Okay, so stages based upon the grading: low grade, high grade and metastatic. Substages are again into intramedullary or local extramedullary. Site of primary lesion, based upon that, based upon prognosis, you can again classify them. Okay. Coming on to the histology. Histology is very, very important. Histology, serum alkaline phosphate level is increased in case of osteosarcoma because there is excess amount of bone formation. Okay, so because of that, the serum alkaline phosphatase level is increased. But you have to remember this particular point, very, very important. Calcium and phosphorus levels remain normal in case of osteosarcoma. If you take a laboratory test and if you find out the calcium level and phosphorus level, you can make out that the calcium and the phosphorus levels will be absolutely normal, whereas the serum alkaline phosphatase level will be increased in case of osteosarcoma. Okay, clear? Now finally coming on to the treatment part is very, very important. Treatment part, there is no spontaneous regression as such. Okay, there is no spontaneous regression as such in case of osteosarcoma. Okay, because it obviously you have to go, because it's a true malignant lesion of the bone. There is no spontaneous regression for the lesion. You have to take chemotherapy or conservative surgical therapy, or amputation can also be a treatment plan, or post-operative chemotherapy even after amputation. Okay, so these are the treatment plans. So just remember the important MCQs only, don't go in detail, just remember the important points which will help you for the MCQ. Okay. Coming on to next important lesion, that is malignant lymphoma. So malignant lymphoma is actually, there is neoplastic excess proliferation of lymphopoietic portion of the reticuloendothelial system. Okay, the lymphatic portion is excess production, or there is excess proliferation. So this results in the malignant lymphoma. Okay, and lymphoma is of 2 types mainly: Hodgkin's lymphoma and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And in the oral region, you have to remember this point. In the oral region, main locations are regional lymph node and Waldeur's ring. There is accumulation of lymphoid tissue mainly in the posterior part of the oral cavity, that is involving the lingual, palatine and the pharyngeal tonsils. Okay, so in the oral cavity, this is the main region. Lingual area, palatine and the pharyngeal tonsils are mainly affected. Okay, coming on the first variety, that is Hodgkin's lymphoma, very, very important. Hodgkin's lymphoma histology part is more important. Okay, so it's actually painless enlargement of one or more of the cervical lymph nodes. The lymph nodes will be firm and rubbery in consistency, and the overlying skin will be normal also. Okay, so this is the main particular feature of Hodgkin's lymphoma. Now let's learn in detail about the histology part, that is very important. So histologically, what you can see is the Reed-Sternberg cells. Okay, so the Reed-Sternberg cells, which are actually owl eye appearance. Okay, so histologically, if you see under the microscope, this is the centromere cell in that picture. Is the particular Reed-Sternberg cell. It's a owl eye kind appearance. So they are actually multinucleated cell. That is why that appearance comes. Okay, so what you can see, large size and bilobed nucleus you can see, and each lobe of that particular nucleus will contain a one amphophilic or eosinophilic nucleus, and the chromatin within will be vesicular and condensed towards the peripheral region. So then two bilobe nucleus you can see, and within the nucleus you can see a bilobe region, you can see a eosinophilic nuclei, and periphery wise you can see the chromatin. Okay, so this is a classical Reed-Sternberg cell, mostly seen in which lesion? In a Hodgkin's lymphoma. Remember that point. Okay, so they can show you the picture also, identify the particular type of cell and the particular type of lesion, okay, in which it is present. So this is a Reed-Sternberg cell picture. It is seen in case of Hodgkin's lymphoma. Remember these 2 points. Now we can do staging of Hodgkin's lymphoma based upon the number of lymph nodes involved. Okay, so they are classified stage into stage 1, 2, 3 and 4, and this particular staging is based upon the diaphragm, okay, the location of diaphragm. So just see in that picture, now concentrate onto that picture. In that picture you can see the diaphragm, right? So for stage 1, the first picture, stage 1, above the diaphragm there is only one single lymph node being involved. Okay, that is stage 1. If 2 or more lymph nodes on the same side, okay, that is on the same side above the diaphragm, okay, is involved, it is stage 2. Stage 3 is like both sides lymph nodes are involved, above and below the diaphragm is involved, then it is stage 3. And stage 4, the last one, other than involvement on both the sides of the diaphragm, you can also see the involvement of another particular location. Okay, there is a disseminated foci of involvement. In this particular case you can see the involvement of the liver and also the bone also. Okay, so this is how it is being staged, stage 1, 2, 3, 4 based upon the diaphragm. Okay, location of diaphragm, which side it is involved and how many number is involved. Okay, now coming on to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, most of the times the location is a extranodal lymphoma, the extra outside the lymphoma. In the head and neck area, mostly it is seen in the palatal region. So the most frequent locations of extranodal lymphoma in the head and neck area is mainly palate, where the tumor will be actually appearing as what? See the picture, you can see a non-tender boggy swelling, you can see. Okay, clear? So this is the most common site. Now let's move on to the histology part. In histology also, what you can see is below the epithelium there is large amount of lymphatic vessels. Okay, so there is diffuse infiltration of subepithelium. Just below the epithelium you can see connective tissue which is infiltrated by that of lymphoma. This is another classical picture of a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, where you can see the extranodal lymph node involvement, and it is mainly in this particular picture it is in the cervical region. Coming on to the exam viewpoint, one important type of in lymphoma which we have to learn is Burkitt's lymphoma. It's very, very important. Okay, so Burkitt's lymphoma is actually a type of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I just showed you the pictures of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It is actually extranodal involvement commonly. So this I showed you in order to explain Burkitt's lymphoma. So Burkitt's lymphoma is a high-grade variant of this type of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, where there is proliferation of B cell. Okay, among the lymphocytes, the B cells are mostly proliferation in case of Burkitt's lymphoma. So that is very, very important. MCQ viewpoint, they can ask you which type of cell is mostly predominating in case of Burkitt's lymphoma. It is B cell, and it was based upon the name of the scientist Dennis Burkitt. He explained the lymphoma, and the etiology of Burkitt's lymphoma is mainly Epstein-Barr virus. It's very important. Epstein-Barr virus is the one which causes Burkitt's lymphoma. So along with that, just remember which are the other 2 lesions which are caused by Epstein-Barr virus. Okay, that is also another important MCQ. Epstein-Barr virus causes Burkitt's lymphoma. It can also cause other lesions like infectious mononucleosis and nasopharyngeal carcinoma. So remember BIN. Okay, BIN, BIN, Epstein-Barr virus in a bin. So Epstein-Barr virus that causes Burkitt's lymphoma, infectious mononucleosis and nasopharyngeal carcinoma. So remember important points. So histology wise, in case of Burkitt's lymphoma, one important MCQ is histological picture of Burkitt's lymphoma is starry sky appearance. So this is what is called a starry sky appearance. See the picture. In that picture you can see the cells are being, so these are actually macrophages. Those white color cells are actually macrophages. I have shown the arrow mark. Okay, so that those macrophages are actually with abundant clear cytoplasm. So that is why you see surrounding, you can see the lymphocytes, and in those lymphocytes you can see mini macrophages being dispersed. So it gives a starry sky appearance. Okay, so this is what the classical appearance, histology wise, the classical appearance of a Burkitt's lymphoma. Remember, starry sky appearance, and the cells which represent the star is actually macrophages with abundant clear cytoplasm. Coming on to multiple myeloma. So multiple myeloma is actually the most common bone cancer. Okay, the most commonly seen bone cancer, the question is being asked like that. So it is multiple myeloma. So often people make a mistake. So multiple myeloma is actually a bone cancer. Osteosarcoma is actually what? The primary malignant tumor of the bone. Okay, primary, it is primary malignant tumor of the bone. Okay, so multiple myeloma is actually the most commonly seen bone cancer, and the neoplasm of the bone that originates from the cells of bone marrow. From which cells? From that of plasma cells. The cells which give rise to multiple myeloma is actually the plasma cells present in the bone marrow. So what happens here is, it is multicentric in origin. The lesions arising in some numerous areas at approximately same time it will be arising. Okay, and the most common site is mandible compared to maxilla, and radiographically there are numerous sharply punched out areas. In case of multiple myeloma, if you take a radiograph and see, you can see multiple punched out areas within the jaw. Okay, if you take the head and neck region radiograph, you can see multiple punched out areas of the jaw. The laboratory test and finding is very important in case of multiple myeloma. The main important finding is Bence-Jones proteins. Bence-Jones proteins are seen in urine of multiple myeloma affected individuals. So what is the, how do we identify it is Bence-Jones protein? So this protein is actually an unusual protein. This will coagulate when the urine, if you take a urine from that of a multiple myeloma affected individual, and if you heat it, the Bence-Jones protein present in that urine will get coagulated. Okay, so it coagulated under 40 degree to 60 degrees centigrade, and then as the urine boils, this coagulation will disappear, and then again when the urine gets cooled, it will reappear. So reappear when the urine is being cooled. So this is the classical picture you see laboratory wise, that is Bence-Jones protein in multiple myeloma. So the urine, as it gets heated up, it coagulates at 40 to 60 degrees centigrade, and then it disappears when it boils, and then once it cools down again it reappears. Okay, and these Bence-Jones proteins, other than multiple myeloma, they are seen in two other different lesions also, that is leukemia and polycythemia. Leukemia and polycythemia. Remember this point, Bence-Jones proteins are seen in multiple myeloma, in leukemia, as well as in polycythemia. Okay, now I told you multiple myeloma is caused by the plasma cells. So these plasma cells are giving the Russell's bodies. Okay, multiple myeloma plasma cells appear as Russell's bodies. Okay, in plasma cells. Okay, so that is the picture I have shown there. So Russell's bodies in plasma cells can be seen. So now histologically what we can see is sheets of closely packed cells can be seen. The plasma cells will be like a sheets of closely packed cells. They are round or ovoid cells with eccentrically paced nuclei exhibiting chromatin clumping. Okay, so this clumping, because of this clumping of chromatin, it will be like cartwheel appearance or a checkerboard pattern. Okay, so cartwheel appearance or a checkerboard pattern you can see histology wise, and you can see, and the prognosis is actually multiple myeloma prognosis is very poor. The patient affected individual may die within 2 to 3 years. Okay, this is the his description about multiple myeloma. So remember the important points. It is the most common bone cancer, and is caused by the plasma cells. Laboratory test gives you Bence-Jones protein. Remember the Russell's bodies in the plasma cells. Other than that, the cartwheel appearance and the checkerboard pattern. Now let's learn in detail about muscle tumors. Okay, so when there is an abnormal tissue growth located within the or originating from that of a muscle tissue, it results in muscle tumor. So as you all know, which are the two different types of muscles? You can see skeletal muscle smooth muscle and cardiac muscles, isn't it? So this is a classical. So before we go into the lesions of muscle tumors, let's learn the normal skeletal muscle. So this is the classical skeletal muscle in a picture. Okay, skeletal muscle will be having striations, cross striations will be there, and also you can see A band, I band. Okay, so this is the classical picture of a skeletal muscle. Now what about a smooth muscle? Smooth muscle will not be showing any striations. Okay, you cannot see any striations. So this is the classical smooth muscle picture. Now let's learn about leiomyoma. Leiomyoma is actually the benign neoplasm of the smooth muscles. Okay, and it is mostly uncommon within the oral cavity, and if it is present in the oral cavity, it is mostly seen in tongue and hard palate area. So that is a clinical picture of a leiomyoma. So benign neoplasm of smooth muscle is leiomyoma. Okay. And a few special stains are present which will help you to identify the smooth muscles. Okay, so if you take a excision of this particular lesion, and then if you see under the microscope using special stains like Masson trichrome stain, the smooth muscle will stain red in color. So first picture you can see red color. So that area is actually the smooth muscle area. So the smooth muscles are present in that particular lesion, so you can easily confirm it is leiomyoma. Okay, and second picture shows you the fibrils, myofibrils. So these myofibrils within the muscles are demonstrated with the help of Mallory's phosphotungstic acid hematoxylin or PTH stain. Okay, so remember the names of two stains, Masson's trichrome stain. With Masson's trichrome stain, the smooth muscle gives what color? Red color. Okay, whereas myofibrils blue color with PTH stain. Coming on to rhabdomyoma. Rhabdomyoma is actually the benign tumor of a skeletal muscle. So we told you smooth muscle is there, skeletal muscle is there. So the tumor of a skeletal muscle is rhabdomyoma, and the tumor of a smooth muscle is leiomyoma. Okay, remember these two differences. Coming on to fetal rhabdomyoma. Fetal rhabdomyoma is the one which is seen mostly in the children. Okay, so it usually occurs in newborns and young children, and the common site is actually classical site. It is a classical site, that is the predilection for post-auricular soft tissue area. So the fetal rhabdomyoma, most common classical site is actually the posterior auricular region. Okay, so that picture, you remember that picture of that baby with that of fetal rhabdomyoma. Note the location. The location is posterior auricular region. Now coming on to congenital epulis. So by the term itself, congenital means by birth. Okay, by birth itself the child will be having the lesion. So this is actually, see the picture, a unique kind of growth which you can see within the oral cavity of the children. It's a unique and very rare, also rarely seen congenital tumor, mainly of the alveolar mucosa of the jaw. Mainly it is seen in the maxillary region compared to mandible. So remember the picture carefully. The lesion I have shown in the maxilla. So it is commonly affecting maxilla compared to mandible, and the ratio is around 2:1. Okay, maxilla is mostly involved, and mainly which area? Canine and lateral incisal area you can see. So relate and study with the picture. The congenital epulis is mostly seen in the maxilla compared to mandible, and it is 2 times greater than compared to mandible when you see the predominance, and then mainly in the canine and the lateral incisal area. Okay, so this tumor was first described by the scientist Newman in 1871. So that is why this tumor is also called as Newman's tumor. Okay, so remember that term, Newman's tumor. So it's a unique and rare congenital tumor of the alveolar mucosa of the jaw. Okay, Newman's tumor. Coming on to leiomyosarcoma. So leiomyosarcoma, from the term itself, it is the malignant neoplasm of smooth muscle origin. Okay, so I have told you earlier itself what is leiomyoma. Leiomyoma was the benign version of smooth muscle origin. Okay, so the malignant form of that is leiomyosarcoma. Just remember that term, that is enough. Okay, so leiomyosarcoma means it is connected to smooth muscle, and leiomyoma is actually benign version and malignant version is myosarcoma. Coming on to skeletal muscle. Okay, skeletal muscle, you can see the malignant version is rhabdomyosarcoma. So in the benign version it was rhabdomyoma. So when it comes to the malignant version, it is rhabdomyosarcoma. It is also the most common soft tissue sarcoma of the children, adolescents and young adults. So like that also the question can be asked, the most common among the tumors of sarcomas. Okay, among the sarcomas which are seen in the children, adolescents and young adults, the most common sarcoma is actually rhabdomyosarcoma. It is connected to skeletal muscle, the most common. Okay. Now next lesion is myoblastoma. Myoblastoma, see the picture, the main site is tongue. So it's a benign tumor of tongue is known as myoblastoma. So relate and study with the picture. Myoblastoma, the picture shown is the tongue. It is the benign tumor of tongue. Okay, the most common site is tongue. And it is otherwise known as granular cell myoblastoma. Okay, based on the histology part. Okay, mainly granular cells are present in this type of tumor. So myoblastoma's most common site is tongue. Remember that. So with that, we came to the end of muscle tumors. Now we are moving on to the next section in the connective tissue. The next part is nerves, isn't it? So nerve tissue tumors. Which are the nerve tissue tumors? They can be again broadly divided into reactive type of lesions, benign tumors and malignant tumors connected to the nerve. Okay, so the reactive lesions are traumatic neuroma. If you undergo any kind of trauma or if you undergo any kind of injury or fracture, there can be a development of neuroma that is known as traumatic neuroma. Okay, now second type is benign tumor. Benign tumors are, which are they? Granular cell tumors. Okay, MENS syndrome, multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome, neurofibroma, neurilemoma. These two are very, very important MCQ viewpoint. Okay, neurofibroma, neurilemoma are benign tumors of nerve tissue tumors. Remember that. And last one, melanotic neuroectodermal tumor of infancy. And coming on to malignant tumors, we have two, that is neurofibrosarcoma. Okay, that is the malignant version of neurofibroma, that is neurofibrosarcoma. And second one is olfactory neuroblastoma. Now here I have shown the classical picture of a nerve tissue. Just note down how does the nerve appear. So the nerve, just note down the important features. You have a central nucleus. Okay, you have the dendrites, the cell body, neurofibrils are present. Okay, and there is a axon, and there is a axon hillock where it connects. Okay, and there are Schwann cells. There are in between the Schwann cells, one Schwann cell to another Schwann cell connected with nodes of Ranvier. Okay, and last end we have the axon terminal. So Schwann cells are actually the cells which are covering the axonal region. Okay, so remember that. Now most of the tumors of neural tissue arise in connection with the sheath. Okay, I showed you just now what is the nucleus area as well as the sheath area. So most of the tumors are arising in connection with the sheath of the peripheral nerves mainly, or the neuroglia and the immature nerve cell themselves. Okay, so this is a very important point you have to note down. Majority of the times the nerve tumors are originating in relation to the nerve sheath. Okay, not to the nucleus centermost region, to the nerve sheath. Okay. Let's move on to the first one, that is traumatic neuroma. As I told you, there is a history of, when you take the history of the patient would have undergone some site of injury in that particular site where the traumatic neuroma has gone, okay, has grown. So in that area there will be a site of previous injury will be noted. Okay, and most of the times it is seen along the mental foramen. So the first case was reported in relation to that of mental foramen. Okay, that it can be asked as a practical question also. So the most commonly injured nerve in case of maxilla and mandible fractures is the mental foramen, the mental nerve, and there can be a chance of development of traumatic neuroma in that region. Okay. So if the patient comes to your clinic with this kind of tumor, okay, so just see the picture, the classical picture. There is a development of small growth in the mental foramen area. Okay, mental foramen area. So the patient will be often having a history of trauma in that area. Okay, and mostly it is seen near the mental foramen, as I told you, on the alveolar ridge area. See the picture, relate and study on the alveolar ridge in the edentulous area, or maybe on the lips also, or sometimes it may be displaced to the tongue area also. Okay, so most of the times there will be a history of trauma, and most of the times it will be located near the mental foramen in case of traumatic neuroma. Coming on to the histology part, if you see the histology, what you can find out in that microscopic feature is the masses of irregular and often interlacing neurofibrils and Schwann cells will be situated in the connective tissue stroma of either scanty or of plentiful proportion. So look into the picture now. What you can see is, you can see bundles of cells. Okay, you can see almost 5 bundles in that particular picture. So those bundles are actually the nerve fibers, the bundles of nerve fibers, nerve fibrils and Schwann cells. So histologically what you can see, there will be a nerve bundle, and surrounding that you will have the growth of the lesion. Okay. Now coming on to the next lesion, that is palisated encapsulated neuroma. So most of the time it is classified as a true neuroma because of the proportions of axons to the Schwann cells is approximately 1:1. So how many number of axons are there to that of the Schwann cells is almost equal in number. So that is almost 1:1. That is why the palisated encapsulated neuroma is often considered to be a true neuroma because it is truly nerve origin. That is why true neuroma. The number of axons equal to number of Schwann cells. So that means it contains mostly the nerve fibrils. Okay, the nerve tissue. And most of the time the site is actually the palatal region or the upper lip region. Okay, so note the location. Palate, the second picture shows the palate and first picture shows the upper lip region. Okay, followed by tongue. And usually it will be firm with absence of buttonhole sign. So most of the time it will be that buttonhole. I think most of you will be remember that buttonhole, isn't it? So that buttonhole sign will be absent in this case. So this is the classical picture of palisated encapsulated neuroma. Now if we do the special staining, if we do a special staining of this palisated encapsulated neuroma, as I told you, it contains equal number of Schwann cells and the nerve fibrils. So in special staining, what we can see, mainly ammoniacal silver method we use, okay, to stain the peripheral nerves. Okay, you can see a dark brown color, that arrow mark you note down. You see the picture now. In that picture, can you make out the black arrow pointing towards the black fibrils? So these are actually the axons of the nerves. Okay, so the presence of these axons, what it marks? It marks that it is actually the nerve fibril origin. That is, it is a true neuroma. Coming on to very important MCQ, that is schwannoma or neurilemoma. Neurilemoma, the another term is schwannoma. Okay, remember that neurilemoma, the other term is schwannoma, and it's a tumor of nerve sheath origin. So I showed you the nerve, entire nerve image. In that I showed you the nucleus part, okay, and the axon part, and there is a covering, nerve sheath covering. So this schwannoma or neurilemoma is actually a tumor of nerve sheath origin, and it is derived from the Schwann cells. Okay, there was a Schwann cell surrounding the nodes and the connection was nodes of Ranvier. So it is originating from the Schwann cells. Okay, so note that point. And uncommonly neurilemomas may be present as multiple lesions also. Okay, sometimes it might be solitary, okay, as a single lesion as shown in the picture, or sometimes it will be shown as more than 2 to 3 lesions. Okay, there is multiple neurilemomas growth can be seen, and it is an important feature of neurofibromatosis. Okay. Coming on to the oral region, the presentation of neurilemoma in the oral region, how does it appear? The most common site is tongue. So the clinical picture I have shown is the lesion with the tongue, okay, on the tongue. So the tongue is the most common site of neurilemoma, remember that point. And how does it appear? It appears as a slow growth, okay, but it is encapsulated tumor that typically arises in association with the nerve trunk, and it grows, it pushes the nerve aside with accompanied symptoms like tenderness or pain. So note down the sentence, very, very important. How does it clinically appear? It is showing a slow growth pattern. Okay, and if you take a section of it and if you see under microscope, there is a covering. It will be like inside a capsule. So it is encapsulated tumor, and it is seen always in association with a nerve trunk. There will be a nerve trunk associated with it, and as the lesion grows, it will be pushing the nerve trunk to one side. Okay, and this pushing will make tenderness or pain as a symptom for the patient. Okay, so this is the classical feature of neurilemoma or schwannoma, remember that. And tongue is the most common site of neurilemomas. Now if you see a microscopic picture of neurilemoma, what you can see is there will be different things you can see. Okay, firstly you can see a biphasic architecture. Some cells will be arranged in a orderly fashion. These cells are called Antony A type of cells, and second group of cells will be like disordered arrangement. Okay, so that is Antony B type of pattern. So that picture I will show you in the coming slide. So, and secondly what you can see is nuclear palisading. All the nucleus will be arranged in a similar fashion. So you can see a nuclear palisading, okay, resulting in verrucate bodies. And thirdly, what you can see, there will be a capsule. I told you the entire lesion will be covered by a capsule, like a plastic cover. So it is a fibrous capsule will be there, and there will be an associated nerve trunk. So that is, there will be a parent nerve next to it. Okay. And lastly, in some lesions you can see degenerative changes. Okay, so this nerve fibers will be undergoing some kind of degeneration, and as a part of degeneration you can see hyalinized vessels, ancient change, nuclear pleomorphism, you can see hemosiderin deposition. All these are the changes. Okay, so this is a classical histology picture. Now let's see the picture. So as I told you, there are two types of cells, Antony type A and type B. So the ones which are having a characteristic palisading pattern, the one which is arranged in a parallel fashion. Okay, so that is Antony type A. And the cells which are arranged in a disordered arrangement, okay, that is Antony type B. See, this histology picture is very clear. In this picture, what you can see, the cells, the black arrow is showing cells arranged in a parallel pattern. So that is Antony A type of cell arrangement. And the blue arrow mark, okay, blue arrow mark is actually showing Antony type B. Okay, Antony type B, that is disordered arrangement of the cells. Okay, so there are two types. The two types of arrangement you can see seen within the same lesion. Okay. One is parallel arrangement of the nucleus, palisading pattern, that is Antony type A. Other one is disordered arrangement, and that is type B. So this biphasic architecture is seen in neurilemoma. What are Verrucay bodies? As I told you, there can be some hyaline structures present within the lesion, which is known as Verrucay body. So that is the second picture is showing a Verrucay body, hyalinization within the lesion. And the first one is showing actually the degeneration of Antony type B tissue results in microcyst. I told you what a type B, they are disordered arrangement. The arrangement is disordered arrangement, isn't it? Those types of cells are actually disordered arrangement. So when there is a degeneration for this such type of cells, it results in a microcyst formation, small cyst within the lesion. Okay, there is microcyst formation within the schwannoma, and Verrucay bodies are actually hyaline structures present within the schwannoma. Coming on to next lesion, it's actually the other term of this lesion is very important for MCQ, ancient schwannoma. Ancient schwannoma is otherwise known as Ackermann and Taylor tumor. Okay, so which tumor is known as Ackermann's tumor? Ancient schwannoma is known as Ackermann's tumor, but it is actually a histological variant of neurilemoma itself. Okay, it's a histological variant. And it was identified in the year 1951, described in the year 1951. So Ackermann and Taylor tumor is ancient schwannoma, and most of the times it is seen in the lip and the tongue region. Coming on to next important lesion, neurofibroma. So what was the main feature of neurilemoma? Neurilemoma, as I told, is originating from the Schwann cells, and there was a capsule surrounding the lesion. Okay, but in case of neurofibroma, it is also a tumor of Schwann cells, but it is non-encapsulated. So if you see a tumor under the microscope with capsule surrounding it, it is neurolemoma. Okay, but if you don't see a capsule surrounding it, it is neurofibroma. Okay, so that is a major difference. Non-encapsulated tumor of Schwann cells is actually neurofibroma. There will be no capsule, neurofibroma. Okay, clear? And this tumor is also originating from the Schwann cells and perineural fibroblasts, as I told you. So clinically, as I told you, neurofibroma can appear as a solitary lesion also, or as a multinodular lesion. Multiple sites also it can appear. So 60% of the lesions are associated with von Recklinghausen's diseases of the skin. Remember that point. Neurofibromas are most of the time seen in association with von Recklinghausen's disease of the skin. Okay, and how does it appear? They are circumscribed solitary neurofibroma, and they're not associated with neurofibromatosis. And second type, as I told you, it is in association with the von Recklinghausen's disease. And growth pattern, if you see, it can be seen as a localized lesion, or as a diffuse lesion, or as a plexiform lesion. So three types of growth patterns are there: localized, diffuse, and plexiform. Just note down this picture. It is not that important MCQ wise. Okay, it is not that important, but just note down the shredded carrot like appearance. If you see under histology, it will be like shredded carrot. As you peel off the carrot and then you do small shredding of the carrot, right? So similar pattern is seen And the third picture is actually showing you the S100 staining. Okay, that is IHC staining, immunohistological staining. S100 staining, you can see the neurofibroma cells. Now this lesion is very important. As I told you, most of the 60% of neurofibromas, solitary neurofibromas, are associated with von Recklinghausen's disease of the skin. This is actually a hereditary disorder, autosomal dominant. Okay, so most of the time it will be affected with males. Okay, and here what you can see solitary neurofibromas for that individual affected with this disease. Secondly, what you can see, skin pigmentations, and thirdly, bony abnormalities. Okay, and there is a high chance of development of this solitary neurofibromas to develop into neurofibrosarcoma. Okay, so von Recklinghausen's disease of the skin is very, very important. Autosomal dominant disorder, and the three important features of the disease is you can see solitary neurofibromas all over the body of the patient. Skin pigmentation will be there along with that bony abnormalities. So the pigmentation is known as cuffulate macules. Okay, cuffulate spots or cuffulate macules you can see. Okay, and as I had told you before itself, cuffulate spots are seen in other lesions like polyarthritic fibrous dysplasia also. So that will be learning in detail in case of disease of bone. When we learn that chapter, we'll be dealing in detail. Okay, so just remember, why does this disease appear? It is because of the mutation of neurofibroma 1 gene on chromosome 17q11.2, which is responsible for the tumor suppression protein product, that is neurofibrin. So it was supposed to suppress this neurofibrin product, okay, but there is a mutation of this NF1 gene which is on the chromosome 17q11.2, which results in this particular condition. Okay, so it's an autosomal dominant neurofibromas, you can see skin pigmentations, cuffulate spots, and bony abnormalities. Okay, now how do you diagnose if a patient comes to you with all these lesions? How do you diagnose the patient is having von Recklinghausen's disease? First criteria, the patient should have cuffulate macules which is above 5 mm in diameter. Okay, that must be around 6 or more in number. Secondly, the patient should have neurofibromas 2 or more on his body. Thirdly, the patient should have freckling in the axillary or inguinal region, which is known as the Krause sign. Okay, fourthly, optic glioma. Fifth, he or she should have 2 or more Lisch nodules, okay, on the eye. Okay, so these, and bony lesion also, the sixth point. And the patient should have a autosomal dominant type of disorder, that is, it is hereditary. Okay, so this is the diagnostic criteria. Mainly the ones which I have given in yellow is very, very important. 6 or more cuffulate spots he should have, freckling as well as Lisch nodules, and neurofibromas 2 or more in number. In case of a patient with von Recklinghausen's disease, the most common radiological feature is that there will be enlargement of the branching of mandibular canal. See the picture, it's very, very clear. Okay, what you can see, there is increased bone density. Because of that, what you can see is there is enlargement of or branching of the mandibular canal is very, very clear in that picture, OPG. Okay, so this is the classical radiographic picture in case of a neurofibroma, or in case of von Recklinghausen's disease related to neurofibroma. Now note down very clearly what are the features of von Recklinghausen's disease. As I told you, see the clinical picture, relate and study always. The first one is showing the cuffulate spots. So the patient should have 6 or more cuffulate spots. Second picture is showing the neurofibromas. Okay, mainly in the palatal region is shown in that area. Neurofibroma growth is shown. Thirdly, you can see the Lisch nodules. Is it clear in that iris? You can see small white spots, that is Lisch nodules. And axillary freckling. Okay, that is Krause sign. Okay, that is the fourth picture. Okay, of the child. So these are the features of von Recklinghausen's disease. Coming on to next important lesion, that is multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome 3. So in this particular lesion, here what you have as the title says, the tumors of endocrine organs is what is happening here in association with other pathological features. So you have tumors of endocrine organs. So it is again subdivided into 3 types: Men's syndrome 1, type 2 and type 3. Type 1 is actually a benign tumor of the pancreatic islets. Type 2 is again subdivided into 2A and 2B. 2A is the Sippel syndrome. So remember that point. Men's syndrome type 2A is the Sippel syndrome. It's a routinely asked MCQ. Which type of Men's syndrome is Sippel syndrome? It's actually type 2A. And 2B is actually patients having abnormal phenotype which is characterized by Marfanoid habitus neuromas on the tongue. Okay, and lastly, type 3 is inherited as autosomal dominant disorder with a high degree of penetrance. So, which is Sippel syndrome? Sippel syndrome is actually Men 2A. Now see the clinical picture. See the clinical picture, very clear it is. First one is showing the first metacarpal joint. Okay, the wrist joint. There is complete hyperextension with no pain. Secondly, you can see a chest deformity. Third C is showing actually a neuroma in the anterior tongue region. And lastly, you can see the dentition disorder. Okay, this is actually the features of Men 2B syndrome. So here the point which you should remember is histopathology. So in case of Men 2 type, okay, multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type, there is striking resemblance to traumatic neuroma. As I told you in the beginning itself, what is traumatic neuroma? There will be a injury to that of a normally it will be towards the mental foramen, okay, in the oral cavity or within the jaw region. So there will be a history of trauma. Okay, so the same similar striking resemblance will be there to traumatic neuroma. And another important thing you should remember is in case of pheochromocytomas, it will result in increased levels of vinyl mandelic acid VMA, and there is altered epinephrine and norepinephrine ratios. Because this is a neoplasm of endocrine system, there is a higher chance for increased levels of vinyl mandelic acid as well as altered epinephrine and norepinephrine ratio. Now let's learn the last lesion. Okay, malignant connective tissue tumor, that is melanotic neuroectodermal tumor of infancy. Very, very important. Okay, so melanotic neuroectodermal tumor of infancy is actually a benign neuroectodermally derived tumor with a predilection mainly for the anterior maxilla. So see the picture of the child with anterior maxilla, mainly in young infants. Okay, mostly it affects in infants. So tumor of infancy, it's actually tumor of infancy, so it affects the young infants. Predilection mainly for anterior maxilla, and it's a benign neuroectodermally derived tumor. The growth of this lesion is very rapid, okay, with the lesion extending into the adjacent buccal sulcus area also, and it will be very difficult for the baby to have feeding. So this will ultimately result in death of the individual. And finally, it results, the laboratory value, if you see, as I told you, vinyl mandelic acid, okay, VAM. There is higher urinary excretion of VAM is strongly associated with melanotic ectodermal tumor of infancy, and this supports what? Neural crest origin. This supports the neural crest because of the high amount of VAM. It supports what? It supports neural crest origin. Okay. So with this we come to the end of connective tissue tumors, malignant connective tissue tumors. So in this particular portion we dealt about the connective tissue malignant tumors, okay, the ones which are related to the blood, the one which is related to the bone, the ones which are related to the cartilage, the one which is related to that of the muscles, okay, nerves, okay, finally. So that is the end of this chapter. So solve the MCQs and see, and if you have any doubt, do message me, okay, try to contact, do message, okay, revise. These are one of the most toughest chapters of oral pathology. So revision is the only key that you can retain them for the exam, okay. Within 45 seconds you have to remember and you have to choose the correct MCQ answer. So for that rapid recollection you have to revise. Okay, clear? Thank you. Thanks a lot.